She's a billionaire CEO who could have anyone, but she fell hard for the muscular carpenter renovating her mansion. What happens when a woman who controls boardrooms loses control of her heart to a man who works with his hands? Hello, my beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome to your new favorite escape. I'm so excited you're here. Drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're watching from. Are you team coffee or team tea right now? And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button because we've got a story today that will make your heart race and your soul swoon. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. The first thing Victoria Sterling noticed about her newly purchased Westbrook estate wasn't the peeling wallpaper or the creaking floorboards that needed replacing. It was the silence. A rare commodity in her life of constant board meetings, investor calls, and charity galas. She'd bought the crumbling mansion on impulse 3 weeks after breaking off her third engagement to another venture capitalist who'd proven to be more interested in merging portfolios than building a life together. Her Louboutins clicked against marble as she navigated through sawdust and construction debris. This wasn't a typical site visit. She'd come here to escape, to breathe, to find something real in a world where everything felt calculated and cold. Victoria ran her fingers along the banister, feeling the centuries of stories embedded in the wood. This place was nothing like her sleek penthouse downtown. It was messy, imperfect, authentic. The rhythmic pounding of a sledgehammer drew her toward the library wing. Victoria paused at the doorway, the words she'd prepared for the renovation foreman dying on her lips. There he stood, shirtless in the afternoon light streaming through tall windows. His broad back glistened with sweat, muscles rippling with each powerful swing of the sledgehammer against the damaged wall. Wood shavings clung to his dark hair, sawdust dusted across shoulders bronzed from outdoor work. He hadn't noticed her yet, lost in the precision of his craft. Then he turned, mid-swing, and their eyes locked. The hammer froze in midair. Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in a decade, not attraction tied to net worth statements or compatibility algorithms or strategic advantages, but pure, unfiltered connection that hit her with the force of that suspended sledgehammer. For the first time since building her tech empire from her college dorm room, Victoria Sterling, whose face graced the cover of Forbes and whose name topped most eligible billionaire lists, felt utterly exposed. Not as a CEO, not as an heiress, but as a woman seeing something she desperately wanted but didn't know how to acquire. He lowered the hammer slowly, never breaking eye contact. "Miss Sterling." His voice was deep, roughened by exertion. "I didn't expect you today." Victoria struggled to find her CEO voice. "I wanted to see the progress." The lie felt obvious, even to her. One corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been amusement or skepticism. "Jake Morrison," he offered, not extending his dusty hand. "I'm handling the library restoration personally." But what she doesn't know yet is that this carpenter is hiding a secret that could destroy everything she's built, or save her from the life that's slowly killing her soul. Victoria Sterling hadn't reached the summit of the tech world by accident. At 34, she'd built Prism Technologies from a college coding project into a multi-billion-dollar empire that revolutionized data security. Business magazines called her ruthless. Board members called her brilliant. Everyone called her intimidating. But alone in her penthouse each night, Victoria wondered if anyone would ever see beyond the power suits and quarterly reports to the woman underneath. 3 failed engagements had taught her a painful lesson. Men either wanted her as a trophy or resented her success. Her last fiancé had actually suggested she step down as CEO after their wedding to focus on family. Victoria had returned the ring that same evening. Now, she smoothed her silk blouse as she watched Jake Morrison work. Unlike the careful, calculated men of her world, he moved with unhurried confidence, every swing of his hammer deliberate and sure. His weathered jeans and worn work boots spoke of a life lived outside boardrooms and benefit galas. What Victoria didn't know was that Jake Morrison had once been Jacob Morrison, rising star at Hathaway Architectural Group. With a master's degree from MIT and industry awards lining his office walls, he'd been fast-tracked to partner before his 30th birthday. Until the Riverview project changed everything. When he discovered his firm planned to falsify environmental impact reports to push through a lucrative development, Jake had walked away. Abandoned his corner office, his six-figure salary, and his family's expectations. He'd found unexpected peace in working with his hands, in creating rather than compromising. Now, at 31, he spoke through his craftsmanship rather than PowerPoint presentations. "Miss Sterling, the original crown molding can be restored, but it'll take time," Jake explained, pointing to intricate woodwork along the library ceiling. He didn't mention he'd recognized the rare Baroque pattern immediately, had written a thesis on the architectural style in graduate school. "Time is something I have plenty of," Victoria replied, surprising herself with the admission. "This room is important to me." Jake nodded, studying her rather than the molding. "Why this mansion? If you don't mind me asking." Before Victoria could answer, her phone erupted with the specialized ringtone she'd assigned to her assistant. "Maya, what's the emergency?" Victoria answered, mouthing an apology to Jake. "Your mother has called 4 times," came Maya Williams' clipped, efficient voice. "She's threatening to come to your office if you don't return her calls. Also, the board wants to move tomorrow's meeting up 2 hours, and Preston Whitfield's office sent over another dinner invitation with, and I quote, a very special surprise planned." Victoria pinched the bridge of her nose. "Decline Preston, reschedule the board, and tell my mother I'm in meetings until next week." "On it." "And Victoria?" Maya's voice softened slightly. "When's the last time you ate something that didn't come in a delivery container?" "I'm fine, Maya." "That's not what I asked." Victoria ended the call, aware of Jake's quiet presence nearby. "Sorry about that." "Your assistant sounds like she cares about you," Jake observed, returning to measuring a section of damaged paneling. "Maya's been with me since the beginning. She's protective." Across the mansion's grounds, in the carriage house Jake had converted to a workshop, 16-year-old Danny Rodriguez carefully sanded a piece of century-old oak. Jake had found the kid trying to steal tools from his truck 6 months ago. Instead of calling the police, he'd offered him an apprenticeship. "Yo, Mr. M." Danny called out when Jake entered. "Check this out, got the grain matched perfectly." Jake examined the wood, nodding appreciatively. "Nice work. Keep this up, you might teach me something soon." Danny beamed, the compliment more valuable than any paycheck. "So what's she like?" "The billionaire lady." Jake's expression remained neutral. "Miss Sterling is our client, Danny." "Professional boundaries." "Yeah, but she's, like, famous." "My sister has her app on her phone. Says Miss Sterling's the reason more girls are getting into coding." Jake thought about Victoria's carefully controlled demeanor, the brief moment when genuine curiosity had replaced boardroom calculation in her eyes. "She seems lonely." The next afternoon, Victoria returned to the mansion carrying an awkward offering, a pitcher of lemonade balanced precariously alongside her laptop. She'd never brought refreshments to contractors before. Her mother, Elizabeth Sterling, would be appalled at such behavior, considering it beneath their station. Victoria found Jake in the library, carefully removing damaged wood panels. He'd stripped down to a white t-shirt that clung to his broad shoulders, a stark contrast to the tailored suits that populated her normal workday. "I brought lemonade," she announced, feeling suddenly ridiculous. "It's hot today, and I thought." "Thank you." Jake set down his tools, wiping his hands before accepting the glass she poured. Their fingers brushed briefly, sending an unexpected current up her arm. He took a long drink, studying her over the rim of the glass. "You know, those aren't exactly the right shoes for a construction site." Victoria glanced down at her designer heels, then back at him with a raised eyebrow. "Are you the fashion police as well as a carpenter?" To her surprise, Jake grinned, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face. He reached behind a stack of lumber and produced a pair of worn work boots. "I keep extras. They're too big, but better than broken ankles." Victoria stared at the offered boots. When was the last time someone had thought about her practical needs rather than her net worth? She slipped off her heels and stepped into the boots, their weight unfamiliar but somehow grounding. "I must look ridiculous," she said, looking down at her pencil skirt paired with oversized work boots. "Practical," Jake corrected. "Not ridiculous." Victoria laughed, a real laugh that bubbled up from somewhere long dormant. The sound surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise Jake, whose eyes widened slightly before crinkling at the corners. As they talked about the library restoration, Victoria noticed Jake's phone lighting up repeatedly. He glanced at it, a shadow crossing his face before he silenced it without answering. Later, when he stepped outside to take another call, his voice carried through the open window, tense, guarded, nothing like the steady tones he used with her. Walking to her car that evening, Victoria passed Jake's truck. Through the window, she glimpsed detailed blueprints spread across the dashboard, complex architectural drawings with structural calculations in the margins. Far more sophisticated than what a renovation carpenter would typically use. Victoria paused, frowning slightly. Who exactly was Jake Morrison? And why did she feel so drawn to a man who clearly had secrets of his own? Victoria's phone rang at precisely 7:30 a.m., her mother's preferred time for dispensing unwelcome news. Despite 10 years of financial independence, Victoria still felt a flutter of anxiety whenever Elizabeth Sterling's name appeared on her screen. "Victoria, darling," her mother began without preamble, "I've decided the Foundation Spring Gala will be held at Westbrook Estate. The committee is thrilled to showcase your restoration project." Victoria nearly dropped her coffee mug. "Mother, the mansion is nowhere near ready. The renovations will take months." "Nonsense. I've already sent out the invitations for 6 weeks from Saturday. The library will make a perfect centerpiece. The historical preservation community is quite excited." "The library currently has exposed beams and missing floorboards," Victoria countered, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Then I suggest your workers pick up the pace, dear. The governor has confirmed his attendance, and naturally, Preston will be there. He's been so patient with your career focus." The disapproval in Elizabeth's tone was surgical in its precision. Victoria knew this battle was lost before it began. Her mother controlled the Sterling Foundation, the philanthropic arm that gave Prism Technologies its heart. Alienating her would impact not just family dynamics but shareholder confidence. "I'll make it work," Victoria conceded, already calculating impossible timelines. "Wonderful. Now, about your escort for the evening." "I have to go, Mother. Board meeting." Victoria ended the call before Elizabeth could finish her matchmaking attempt. 2 hours later, Victoria stormed into the mansion, her usual composure fractured. Jake looked up from where he was carefully removing rotted wood from the library's bay window. "We have a problem," she announced. Jake straightened, dusting off his hands. "What kind of problem?" "My mother has decided to host her charity gala here. In 6 weeks." Victoria paced the dusty floor, gesturing to the half-demolished room. "She expects this library to be showroom-ready for 300 of Boston's elite." Jake whistled low. "That's ambitious." "It's impossible," Victoria corrected, her CEO voice slipping. I should never have mentioned the renovation to her. This was supposed to be my private project, away from. She stopped abruptly. "Away from what?" Jake asked quietly. Victoria met his gaze. "Away from expectations. Opinions. People who want pieces of me." Something shifted in Jake's expression, recognition, perhaps. "I can finish it," he said after a moment. "Not the entire mansion, but this room. If I work nights and weekends." "You do that? It's important to you." He said it simply, as though that was reason enough. For the next 2 weeks, Victoria found increasingly flimsy excuses to work from the mansion instead of her downtown office. She'd set up her laptop in whatever room was furthest from active construction, yet inevitably found herself drifting toward the library where Jake worked with methodical precision. They fell into an unexpected rhythm. Victoria would bring dinner, discovering that Jake preferred spicy Thai food and couldn't stand cilantro. Jake would explain the day's progress, teaching her about quarter-sawn oak and mortise and tenon joints. Sometimes Danny would join them, his quick mind absorbing Victoria's casual business lessons while she reviewed quarterly reports. It was during one such evening, 3 weeks before the gala, that everything changed. The storm hit without warning, a spring tempest that rattled the mansion's windows and sent tree branches scraping against century-old glass. Victoria and Jake were alone in the library, she reviewing contracts while he installed refurbished ceiling panels. "The weather service says it's going to get worse," Victoria noted, checking her phone. "You should probably head home before the roads flood." Jake descended his ladder. "One more panel, then I'll go. That section won't be stable if I leave it overnight." A tremendous crack of thunder shook the mansion, followed by darkness as the power failed. Victoria's phone provided the only light in the suddenly pitch-black room. "Stay there," Jake instructed. "There's construction debris everywhere." Victoria heard him moving confidently through the darkness. Moments later, the warm glow of emergency lanterns illuminated the space, creating pools of golden light that transformed the half-finished library into something almost magical. "Boy Scout?" Victoria asked, gesturing to his preparedness. Jake's mouth quirked. "Just someone who's worked in enough old buildings to know the power always fails at the worst possible moment." Another thunderous boom, louder than the first, was followed by an ominous splintering crack above them. Jake moved with startling speed, pulling Victoria away from her chair seconds before a massive wooden beam crashed through the ceiling, blocking the library's only exit. "Are you okay?" Jake's hands gripped her shoulders, his face inches from hers in the lantern light. Victoria nodded, breathless more from his proximity than their near miss. That beam wasn't on today's demolition schedule. The unexpected joke surprised a laugh out of Jake. "Your timing needs work," he said, but his hands remained on her shoulders, warm and steady. They assessed the damage together. The fallen beam had effectively trapped them in the library. Jake's phone showed no service, and the mansion's landline was in another wing. "Looks like we're waiting out the storm," Jake concluded, setting up lanterns around the room's perimeter. From a cabinet, he produced a thermos. "Coffee's gone cold, but I might have something to warm it up." He unscrewed the cap and added a generous splash from a small flask, offering Victoria the first drink. The whiskey-laced coffee burned pleasantly down her throat. "Not exactly your usual boardroom refreshments," she said, passing the thermos back. "Somehow I doubt this is your usual boardroom situation either." Outside, rain lashed against the windows while wind howled through the mansion's empty corridors. Inside their lantern-lit island, a different kind of storm was brewing. "Why this place?" Jake asked suddenly. "You could have built something new. Something perfect." Victoria considered deflecting, as she would with anyone else. Instead, she found herself answering honestly. "I'm terrified of becoming my mother." The confession hung between them. Jake waited, not pushing but clearly listening. Elizabeth Sterling has spent her entire life cultivating the perfect image. The perfect home, the perfect charity involvement, the perfect husband, at least publicly. But there's nothing real there. Victoria accepted the thermos again. "This place has character, history. Imperfections. Everything my mother would hate." "And what about you?" Jake asked. "What does Victoria want, not the CEO of Prison Technologies?" "I want something authentic." She met his gaze directly. "Something that wasn't manufactured in a boardroom or arranged by my mother's social committee." Jake's expression softened. "That's why I left architecture." Victoria blinked, surprised by the admission. "My firm wanted me to design a luxury development that would have destroyed a historical neighborhood. Hundreds of people would have lost their homes, but the profit margins were astronomical." Jake's voice tightened. "When I refused, they offered me a partnership to change my mind. But you walked away instead," Victoria realized. Jake nodded. "Found more integrity in restoration than in new construction. In preserving what matters rather than bulldozing it for something shinier." The lantern light cast shadows across his face, highlighting the strength in his jaw, the intensity in his eyes. Victoria found herself leaning closer, drawn by something more powerful than physical attraction, recognition of a kindred spirit. Jake's gaze dropped to her lips. The air between them charged with possibility. Victoria closed her eyes as he leaned in, his breath warm against her skin. Then suddenly, he pulled back. "I can't," he said, voice rough with restraint. "You don't know who I really am." Victoria opened her eyes, confusion and hurt washing over her. Before she could respond, voices called from beyond the block door. The mansion security team, checking for storm damage, had found them. As workers cleared the fallen beam, Jake gathered his tools, his movements efficient but distant. Victoria watched him, the emotional whiplash leaving her uncharacteristically speechless. When the doorway finally cleared, Jake nodded a terse goodnight and disappeared into the storm-dark hallway, leaving Victoria alone with more questions than answers. Rain continued to plague Boston for the next week, mirroring the emotional turbulence Victoria couldn't shake. Each morning she arrived at the mansion earlier, each evening she left later, crafting increasingly implausible reasons to be near the library where Jake worked with focused intensity. Something had changed between them since the storm, a carefully maintained distance, professional but cool, that made her chest ache with confusion. "You've missed 3 executive lunches this week," Maya pointed out, cornering Victoria in what had become her de facto office in the mansion's morning room. "The board is noticing your absences." Victoria continued typing, not meeting her assistant's shrewd gaze. "I'm working remotely. The productivity apps they worship so much show I'm exceeding last quarter's metrics." "This isn't about productivity metrics." Maya perched on the edge of a dusty queen and chair. "This is about you spending every waking hour at a half-demolished mansion when you have a perfectly good penthouse and corner office. I'm supervising an important renovation." Maya's arched eyebrow spoke volumes. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Before Victoria could formulate a suitably cutting response, the mansion's front door chimes echoed through the halls, a melodious announcement that someone had managed to bypass security. Only one person had that particular talent. "Victoria?" A cultured male voice called. "Your assistant said I'd find you playing contractor." Preston Whitfield III appeared in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit that probably cost more than most of the construction equipment on site. At 38, he was handsome in the polished way of old money, confident, entitled, and accustomed to getting what he wanted. Currently, what Preston wanted was Victoria, or more specifically, the technological empire she'd built. "Preston." Victoria straightened, slipping into the cool, professional demeanor she wore like armor. "I don't recall scheduling a meeting. Must we be so formal?" He advanced into the room, casting a distasteful glance at the plastic sheeting protecting antique furniture. "We've known each other since prep school. Which means you're familiar with my boundaries regarding unannounced visits." Victoria nodded to Maya, who took the cue and discreetly exited, closing the door behind her. Preston moved closer, invading her personal space with practiced ease. "The board is concerned, Victoria. This acquisition offer from Morrison Construction represents an unprecedented opportunity for shareholder value. The board serves at my discretion," Victoria reminded him coolly. "And Morrison's offer undervalues Prism by at least 30%. Perhaps." Preston smiled, a predatory expression that never reached his eyes. "But combining Whitfield Investment Group with Prism Technologies, backed by Morrison's construction capabilities, that's a conglomerate that could dominate 3 industries. I'm not interested in dominating industries. I'm interested in maintaining Prism's ethical standards and workforce culture." Preston sighed dramatically. "Always the idealist. This is why we would make such perfect partners, Victoria. Your vision, my pragmatism." He reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that felt more possessive than romantic. "Your mother agrees. She mentioned the foundation gala. I've cleared my calendar." Victoria extracted her hand, unaware that Jake had appeared in the doorway behind Preston, carrying wood samples for her approval. His expression darkened at the intimate tableau before him. "Miss Sterling," Jake interrupted, his voice carefully neutral. "I can come back later." Preston turned, assessing Jake with the dismissive glance of someone evaluating household staff. No need. We're finished here. He focused again on Victoria. Think about what I said. A merger would benefit everyone involved. After Preston departed, Jake's demeanor remained distant, professional. The original crown molding pattern can be replicated, but there's a decision needed on the wood type. Victoria tried to explain Preston's unwelcome visit, but Jake's walls had solidified. Your personal life isn't my business, Ms. Sterling. I'm just here to complete the library. The next blow came 3 days later when Jake's careful inspection of the library's central archway revealed extensive structural damage. The water infiltration is worse than we thought, he explained, showing Victoria where moisture had compromised critical support elements. We need to rebuild this section from the joists outward. It's going to double the timeline. Victoria stared at the exposed damage, despair washing over her. The gala is in less than 3 weeks. I know. Jake ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. I can bring in additional help, but even then. No. Victoria's voice hardened with resolve. This is your project. Your vision. We'll figure something out. Their eyes met, a moment of connection breaking through the careful distance they'd maintained. But before either could speak, Victoria's phone erupted with her board chairman's distinctive ringtone. The call was brief but devastating. The board was formally recommending Morrison Construction's acquisition offer. More troublingly, they specifically mentioned her personal connection with Preston Whitfield as a strategic advantage. The optics of announcing the engagement at the gala would reassure shareholders, Chairman Davis explained with uncomfortable familiarity. Elizabeth suggested it would be the perfect venue. Victoria ended the call, shock and anger rendering her temporarily speechless. When she looked up, Jake had resumed work, his shoulders rigid with tension. She wondered how much he'd overheard. That evening, desperate for distraction from the board's machinations, Victoria asked Jake to teach her something about restoration work. To her surprise, he agreed, setting up a workstation with a piece of antique oak that needed refinishing. Like this, he demonstrated, guiding her hand with the sanding block. Always with the grain, never against it. Victoria focused on the smooth, rhythmic motion, acutely aware of Jake standing behind her, his chest occasionally brushing her back as he adjusted her technique. His hands were calloused but gentle, guiding rather than controlling. You have good instincts, he murmured, so close his breath stirred her hair. I have a good teacher, she countered softly. The workshop door banged open as Danny burst in, skidding to a halt when he saw them standing so close together. Whoa, sorry. Didn't know you were here, Ms. Sterling. Jake stepped back, but not before Victoria caught Danny's knowing grin. Perfect timing, Danny. Ms. Sterling was just learning about wood restoration. Cool. Like when you taught me last year. The teenager bounded over to examine her work. Not bad for a first try. You should see what Mr. M can do, though. He restored this entire writing desk for the Children's Hospital fundraiser. Crazy detailed work. Victoria raised an eyebrow at Jake. I didn't know you did charity work. Jake shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. It's nothing special. It was awesome, Danny insisted. The desk went for like $20,000 at the auction. Some rich dude from New York bought it. You never mentioned you were an artist as well as a craftsman, Victoria said. Jake busied himself with organizing tools. Just a hobby. Mr. M.S. too modest, Danny continued, oblivious to Jake's discomfort. He's the only person who believed I could learn this stuff. My probation officer said I'd never amount to anything, but Mr. M said talent doesn't care about your zip code or your record. Victoria studied Jake with new eyes. He's right about that. The following weekend brought Elizabeth Sterling to the mansion for a pre-gala inspection. Victoria had deliberately scheduled the visit during construction hours, hoping her mother would reconsider the venue when confronted with the reality of ongoing renovations. Elizabeth swept through the main hall like a general inspecting troops, her designer heel somehow navigating construction debris without a single misstep. This foyer will need proper floral arrangements. Nothing too modern, old money prefers traditional displays. Mother, be reasonable, Victoria pleaded. The library renovation has encountered structural issues. We should postpone. Elizabeth waved away the concern. Contractors always exaggerate timelines. Simply offer a bonus for completion. Their argument carried them to the library doorway, where Jake was carefully reconstructing the damaged archway. Elizabeth paused, eyeing him with the evaluative gaze she typically reserved for potential sons-in-law. You. She addressed him directly. The library must be completed for the gala. What will it take? Jake straightened, wiping his hands on a cloth before answering. With respect, craftsmanship can't be rushed beyond certain limits. This room has centuries of history worth preserving properly. Elizabeth's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. How refreshingly quaint. However, I'm sure you can appreciate that some things take priority over sentimentality about old wood. My daughter's professional reputation, for instance. Mother, Victoria warned. The gala will showcase Victoria's commitment to heritage preservation while announcing her engagement to Preston. The timing is critical for the Morrison acquisition. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. There is no engagement to announce. Elizabeth patted her daughter's arm condescendingly. Preston has already spoken with me. The ring belonged to his grandmother, quite substantial, I assure you. I am not marrying Preston, Victoria stated firmly. And I'm not selling Prism to Morrison Construction. Don't be difficult, dear. You've rejected every suitable match while burying yourself in work. Preston understands your eccentricities. The merger makes perfect business sense. My company is not an extension of my marital status, Victoria's voice rose. And I don't need the help of someone's son to run it. Elizabeth sighed theatrically. This is why you need guidance, Victoria. Your father would be. Don't. Victoria's tone turned glacial. Don't presume to tell me what Dad would think about my choices. Jake had gone completely still during this exchange, his face unreadable. Elizabeth finally seemed to remember his presence. We'll continue this discussion privately, she said, checking her watch. I have the foundation committee arriving at the club. Do try to be reasonable, Victoria. Some traditions exist for a reason. With a final assessing glance around the library, she departed in a cloud of expensive perfume. The silence left in her wake was deafening. Victoria felt embarrassment and anger battling for dominance. I apologize for my mother's behavior, she finally said, not quite meeting Jake's eyes. No need. His voice was quiet. Family expectations can be complicated. She has no right to arrange my life like some medieval alliance. Victoria paced the room, her professional composure cracking. Morrison Construction has been trying to acquire Prism for years. They want our security technology to cut costs on their development projects, not to innovate. Jake's hands tightened on his tools. You don't think much of Morrison, then? Their environmental record is abysmal, and their labor practices are worse. Everything my company stands against. Victoria stopped pacing, suddenly aware of how much she'd revealed. Sorry. You didn't ask for a corporate rant. Actually, Jake said carefully, I'd like to hear more about your company's ethics policy sometime. The shifting conversation led to their newest ritual. Each evening after work, they'd watch classic films on a laptop propped on a workbench, discussing everything from architecture to technology to film theory. Victoria discovered Jake had a surprising knowledge of art history. Jake learned about Victoria's secret passion for vintage mechanical watches. These evenings became an oasis, hours when Victoria wasn't a CEO and Jake wasn't her contractor. They were simply two people sharing space and conversation, finding unexpected common ground. Meanwhile, Maya had been conducting her own investigation. Victoria's normally unflappable assistant arrived at the mansion one afternoon, tablet in hand and concern etched across her face. We need to talk, she announced, closing the morning room door firmly behind her. About Jake Morrison. Victoria looked up from her laptop. What about him? Maya placed her tablet on the desk, displaying an article from an architectural journal. He's not just a carpenter, Victoria. He's Jacob Morrison, heir to the Morrison construction empire. The room seemed to tilt beneath Victoria's feet. That's not possible. It is. Maya swiped to another screen, a graduation photo showing a younger, clean-shaven Jake in cap and gown. Jacob Morrison, architectural prodigy and sole heir to Richard Morrison's construction dynasty, who mysteriously stepped back from the industry 5 years ago. She made air quotes around the phrase. No public appearances since, but the family still lists him as VP of Special Projects. Victoria stared at the image, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. The sophisticated blueprints. The architectural knowledge. His reaction when she criticized Morrison Construction. Why would he hide who he is? Victoria wondered aloud, though a suspicion was already forming. Unless he's here to gather intelligence for his father's company, Maya finished grimly. The same company trying to acquire Prism in a hostile takeover. Victoria felt the walls she'd carefully constructed against emotional vulnerability reinforcing themselves brick by brick. Keep digging. I want to know exactly what game he's playing. That night, watching Jake work on a section of delicate inlay, Victoria wondered if his hesitation had nothing to do with being intimidated by her wealth and everything to do with his own hidden fortune. Had their connection been genuine, or merely a calculated approach to gain her trust? What Victoria couldn't see was Jake in his workshop later that night, staring at his phone where 10 missed calls from his father illuminated the screen. Nor could she hear his conversation with Danny about integrity and hard choices, or watch him carefully wrapping the small wooden box he'd been carving in secret, a replica of Westbrook Estate's library, detailed down to the window seats where Victoria liked to read. As the gala approached, the tension between them grew, a storm building toward inevitable lightning. The night before the gala arrived with a merciless countdown. Victoria stayed late at the mansion, reviewing seating arrangements while workers installed the final lighting fixtures in the library. Jake had performed miracles with the renovation, the room now gleamed with restored grandeur, every inch of woodwork telling its centuries-old story through his careful craftsmanship. Victoria hadn't confronted him about his identity yet. Part of her hoped for an innocent explanation, while her pragmatic business mind prepared for betrayal. She'd built her empire by trusting data, not emotions, and the evidence against Jake was mounting. She found him in the library after the other workers had gone, adjusting the placement of the original writing desk that now served as the room's centerpiece. It's beautiful, Victoria admitted, running her fingers along the restored wood. I wouldn't have believed this transformation was possible in the time frame. Jake straightened, pride briefly overwhelming the exhaustion etched into his features. Some of these techniques haven't changed in centuries. The craftsmen who built this place knew what they were doing. And so do you. Victoria hesitated, then added, you've given this room back its soul. Something vulnerable flickered across Jake's face. That's the best compliment I could receive. He glanced at his watch. You should get some rest. Tomorrow's your big day. My mother's big day, Victoria corrected. I'm just a prop in her production. Jake gathered his tools, clearly preparing to leave. For what it's worth, I think you're a lot stronger than you realize. You don't have to be anyone's prop. As he reached for his jacket draped over a ladder, his wallet tumbled from the pocket, landing open on the floor between them. Victoria bent to retrieve it automatically, and froze. Staring up at her was a driver's license. Not for Jake Morrison, but for Jacob R. Morrison, with an address in Boston's exclusive Beacon Hill neighborhood. Beside it, partially visible, was a faded photograph of a younger Jake in an expensive suit, standing beside an older man Victoria instantly recognized as Richard Morrison, CEO of Morrison Construction and her company's would-be acquirer. Victoria's fingers tightened around the wallet as she straightened. Were you ever going to tell me? Her voice emerged surprisingly steady despite the betrayal burning through her chest. Jake's expression shifted from confusion to resignation as he realized what she'd seen. Victoria. It's Ms. Sterling, she corrected coldly, or would you prefer Target? Mark? What does Morrison Construction call the CEOs they're trying to destroy? It's not what you think. Really? Because what I think is that you've been spying for your father. Getting close to me to gather information for Morrison's hostile takeover. She flung the wallet at his chest. Was any of it real? Or was I just another demolition project? Jake caught the wallet, his knuckles whitening. You need to let me explain. Explain what? How the heir to Morrison Construction just happened to take a job renovating my home while his father tries to dismantle my company. Victoria laughed bitterly. I built Prism from nothing while you were hiding from your silver spoon legacy. I wasn't hiding, Jake's voice hardened. I walked away. There's a difference. Semantics. You're still Jacob Morrison. And you're still judging me based on my name rather than my actions. Jake stepped closer. Isn't that exactly what you hate when people do it to you? The accuracy of his observation landed like a physical blow. Victoria faltered momentarily before her defenses reasserted themselves. You lied to me. I omitted. There's a difference. Why are you here, Jacob? The truth, this time. Jake ran a hand through his hair, conflict evident in every line of his body. Finally, he exhaled heavily. My father plans to gut Prism Technologies after the acquisition. He doesn't care about your ethical commitments or your employee protections. He wants your security patents to implement cost-cutting measures across Morrison developments. Jake's voice tightened with barely controlled anger. I came to warn you. To find evidence of what he's planning. Why would you betray your own family's company? Because 5 years ago, I discovered my father had falsified safety reports on a major development. When a support structure collapsed and injured 6 workers, he buried the evidence and paid for silence. Jake's eyes burned with old pain. I confronted him, threatened to go public. He reminded me that exposing him would destroy the livelihoods of thousands of employees who had nothing to do with his decisions. Victoria studied him, her analytical mind processing this new information against what she knew of Morrison Construction's reputation. So you walked away instead? Jake nodded. Stepped back from the company officially, but never sold my shares or gave up my board seat. I've been fighting from the inside, pushing for safety reforms, better labor practices. Small victories while I gathered evidence. And now? Now he's planning his biggest move yet. The Prism acquisition would give him access to your security systems that monitor structural integrity. He plans to recalibrate them to show buildings as safe even when they're not, cutting corners on materials while passing inspections. Horror washed through Victoria. That would put thousands of lives at risk. Exactly. When I heard Westbrook Estate needed renovation and you'd be overseeing it personally, I saw an opportunity to warn you directly. Jake's expression turned pained. What I didn't expect was... Was what? Victoria pressed when he trailed off. Jake met her gaze unflinchingly. I didn't expect you. The real you, not the CEO persona. I didn't expect to fall in love with your mind, your determination, the way you light up when you talk about technology that helps people. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Victoria's carefully constructed defenses wavered. I was going to tell you everything, Jake continued. But then I fell in love with you, and I didn't know how. The word love echoed in the restored library, bouncing off carefully preserved woodwork and newly installed windows. Victoria felt something break open inside her chest, part pain, part possibility. Why should I believe you now? Because I have proof. Jake pulled a flash drive from his pocket. Financial records, altered safety reports, and the complete plan for dismantling Prism's ethical framework post-acquisition. My father doesn't know I have these. Victoria took the drive, their fingers brushing. The simple contact sent electricity through her body, complicated now by anger, confusion, and the undeniable truth that despite everything, she still felt drawn to him. You could have told me weeks ago. Would you have believed Jacob Morrison if he showed up claiming his father was corrupt? Or would you have seen it as corporate espionage? He had a point, and Victoria knew it. Before she could respond, Jake closed the distance between them, his hand gently cupping her cheek. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking you to save your company and stop my father before people get hurt. Victoria's resolve crumbled at his touch. Weeks of suppressed attraction, complicated now by betrayal and revelations, collapsed into a single moment of clarity. She leaned forward, erasing the last space between them. Their lips met in a kiss that started desperate and wounded, then transformed into something else entirely, a recognition, a homecoming, a truth that transcended the lies between them. Jake's arms encircled her, pulling her against him as though she might disappear if he let go. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Victoria rested her forehead against his. What do we do now? She whispered. We stop them, Jake replied, determination hardening his features. My father and Preston are working together on this. Preston gets you and your family connections, my father gets your company and its technology. Victoria stepped back, CEO mode reasserting itself. The gala is tomorrow. The board votes on the acquisition Monday morning. Then we have less than 72 hours to expose both of them. Jake's expression softened. I'm not fighting just for what's right anymore, Victoria. I'm fighting for you, for us. Whatever that might mean. Victoria studied him, this man of contradictions, Carpenter's hands with an architect's vision, inheritor of corruption who chose integrity instead. If we do this, there's no going back, she warned. For either of us. Jake nodded solemnly. I made my choice 5 years ago when I walked away. And again the moment I saw you standing in this library, seeing the potential beneath the damage, just like I did. Outside the library windows, dawnlight began filtering through ancient trees. The gala was hours away, and with it, a confrontation that would change everything. The Westbrook estate glowed with elegant lighting as Boston's elite arrived for the Sterling Foundation Gala. Carefully positioned floral arrangements concealed the mansion's unfinished areas, while strategic lighting showcased the completed restoration work. At the center of it all stood the library, Jake's masterpiece, transformed from construction zone to showpiece in 6 impossible weeks. Victoria moved through the crowd in a midnight blue gown, accepting compliments on the renovation while scanning faces for Preston or signs of Richard Morrison. Jake remained out of sight, having promised to stay in the background until they could implement their plan to expose both men. You've outdone yourself, darling, Elizabeth Sterling materialized at Victoria's elbow, resplendent in diamonds and approval. The governor just commented on the exquisite restoration work. And Preston has been looking for you, he has something rather special planned for the evening. Victoria maintained her practiced social smile. I'm sure whatever Preston has planned can wait until after the foundation presentations. Nonsense. These things require perfect timing. Elizabeth lowered her voice. The Morrison acquisition is practically finalized. The board chairman just confirmed their full support. All that remains is the public announcement of your engagement to cement the corporate alliance. Ice formed in Victoria's stomach. There is no engagement, mother. Elizabeth's smile never faltered, though her eyes hardened. Don't be difficult, Victoria. Everything is arranged. Preston has the ring, the photographer from the Globe is here, and Richard Morrison himself has arrived to witness the announcement. Before Victoria could respond, a familiar voice called from behind her. There's my brilliant bride-to-be. Preston appeared, handsome in his tuxedo and radiating the confidence of a man who believed the world existed to fulfill his desires. At his side stood an older, distinguished gentleman Victoria recognized immediately as Richard Morrison, Jake's father. The family resemblance was striking, though where Jake's eyes held warmth and integrity, Richard's calculated gaze reminded Victoria of predators she'd faced in boardrooms. Victoria Sterling, Richard extended his hand. Your reputation precedes you. I've been looking forward to bringing Prism Technologies into the Morrison family of companies. Victoria shook his hand with professional courtesy while internally recoiling. Mr. Morrison. I wasn't aware you'd be joining us tonight. I wouldn't miss it. After all, this isn't just a corporate merger, it's a joining of families. He gestured between her and Preston with unmistakable approval. Preston slipped his arm around Victoria's waist with practiced familiarity. Richard and I have been discussing the announcement. We thought immediately after your mother's foundation speech would be perfect timing. Victoria extracted herself from Preston's grip. There seems to be some confusion. There is no announcement to make. Elizabeth laughed as though Victoria had made a charming joke. My daughter, always so focused on business details. Preston, why don't you show Victoria the architectural plans for the new development? Perhaps that will help her see the bigger picture. Preston produced a tablet from inside his jacket. I thought you might appreciate seeing what we have planned for this property after our marriage. Morrison Construction has designed something truly spectacular to replace this old place. Victoria stared at the rendered images in growing horror. The plan showed Westbrook Estate completely demolished, replaced by luxury condominiums with the Morrison Construction logo prominently featured. You're planning to destroy the mansion. The betrayal stung even though she'd been prepared for some version of it. After all the restoration work. Richard Morrison shrugged dismissively. Historical sentiment is charming, but poor business. The land value alone is astronomical, and with modern construction, we can fit 30 luxury units where this inefficient structure currently stands. I won't allow it. Victoria's voice hardened with CEO authority. This property is mine, not Preston's or Morrison Construction's. Preston's smile turned condescending. Actually, darling, it's not quite that simple. He produced a legal document. Your mother signed over power of attorney regarding Westbrook Estate as part of our marriage agreement. Contingent on the announcement tonight, of course. Victoria turned to her mother in disbelief. Elizabeth at least had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. It's for your own good, Victoria. This obsession with the mansion isn't healthy. Preston understands what's best for your future. The trap was closing from all sides. Victoria glanced around the crowded library, at investors, board members, and society columnists all watching the interaction with interest. A public scene would damage Prism's stock price before Monday's crucial vote. She needed time to implement the plan she and Jake had developed. Before she could respond, Elizabeth clinked her champagne glass, calling for attention. The room quieted as she took her place at the library's center. Welcome, friends, to the Sterling Foundation Spring Gala. We're particularly delighted to host you in my daughter Victoria's newest acquisition, Westbrook Estate. Polite applause filled the room as Elizabeth continued her practice speech. Victoria scanned the crowd desperately, looking for Jake. Where was he? They'd planned to confront Preston and Richard together, armed with the evidence from Jake's flash drive. Elizabeth's speech built to its conclusion. And now, I'm thrilled to share some wonderful personal news. My daughter Victoria. A tremendous crack interrupted her words. Gasps rippled through the crowd as all eyes turned toward the library's magnificent central beam, the one Jake had so carefully restored, which now displayed a jagged fracture running its length. In the momentary confusion, Victoria felt a hand close around her elbow. She turned to find Jake, dressed not in his usual work clothes but in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that transformed him from carpenter to unmistakable heir. The northeastern support is failing, he whispered urgently. Someone tampered with it. We need to evacuate. Before Victoria could respond, Preston's voice cut through the concerned murmurs. Ladies and gentlemen, nothing to worry about. Just a settling of this old structure, which is precisely why modernization is needed. He seized Victoria's hand. And speaking of new beginnings, I have an announcement. In one fluid motion, Preston dropped to one knee before Victoria, producing a velvet box containing a diamond ring that could only be described as ostentatious. Cameras flashed as society photographers captured the moment. Victoria Sterling, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? The room fell silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on Victoria. In her peripheral vision, she saw her mother's triumphant smile, Richard Morrison's calculating gaze, and Jake's barely contained fury. I? Victoria faltered, trapped by social pressure and cameras. Refusing publicly would create a scandal that could tank Prism's stock price before the acquisition vote. Every business instinct screamed at her to play along temporarily, to find another way to fight tomorrow. Preston seized her hesitation, sliding the massive ring onto her finger and rising to press a possessive kiss to her cheek. She said yes, he announced to thunderous applause. Victoria stood frozen as congratulations erupted around her. Through the crowd, she caught a glimpse of Jake's face, devastation quickly masked by resignation as security personnel approached him, clearly recognizing him as staff rather than guest. "Sir, the working crew needs to remain in designated areas," a security guard informed Jake firmly. "I'm Jacob Morrison," Jake stated, his voice carrying enough to make Richard Morrison's head snap around in shock. "And this structure is unsafe." Richard recovered quickly, striding to intercept his son. "Jacob, what an unexpected surprise. Let's discuss this privately." His hand clamped onto Jake's arm with what appeared to be paternal affection but was clearly a restraining grip. Victoria watched helplessly as Richard led Jake from the library, their heated whispers covered by the continuing congratulations surrounding her false engagement. Preston maintained his arm around her waist, his grip tightening whenever she attempted to move. "Smile, darling," he murmured against her ear. "Everything is going exactly as planned." The next hour passed in a blur of champagne toasts and insincere congratulations. Victoria maintained her professional smile while scanning every entrance for Jake's return. She caught glimpses of Richard Morrison rejoining the party, speaking intently with her board chairman, but Jake was nowhere to be seen. When she finally managed to slip away to search for him, Maya intercepted her in a quiet hallway. "He's gone," her assistant reported quietly. "I saw Richard Morrison practically frog-march him to a waiting car." "Victoria, what's happening? Why did you agree to marry Preston?" "I didn't," Victoria hissed, showing Maya the ring still weighing down her finger. "This was a setup. Preston and the Morrisons are working together to take control of Prism and demolish Westbrook." Understanding dawned on Maya's face. "The flash drive Jake gave you is in my office safe. But without Jake's testimony to authenticate it, the board might dismiss it as corporate sabotage." Victoria pressed her fingers to her temples. "Where would Richard take him? I overheard something about the Morrison downtown offices. Apparently, there's an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning." Maya hesitated. "Victoria, there's something else. Jake's father threatened him, said if Jake interfered, he'd destroy the carpentry business and make sure Danny's apprenticeship program lost its funding." Victoria's heart sank. Jake had walked away from wealth and privilege to build something honest with his hands, and now his father was threatening even that. And Danny, the troubled teenager Jake had given a second chance, would become collateral damage. "Miss Sterling." Danny's voice came from the shadows of the mansion's servant staircase. The teenager looked uncomfortable in the borrowed suit Jake had apparently provided for him to attend the gala. "Mr. M wanted me to give you this if anything went wrong." He handed Victoria a small wooden box, intricately carved to replicate the library in miniature detail. Inside lay a single key and a handwritten note, for emergencies. "Storage Unit 247, Harbor Facility. Trust yourself." Victoria clutched the box, fighting back unexpected tears. Even now, Jake had planned for contingencies, had trusted her to continue fighting if they were separated. "What do we do?" Maya asked quietly. Before Victoria could answer, another ominous crack echoed from the library, followed by alarmed voices. Danny's eyes widened. That didn't sound right. The new support shouldn't be making that noise unless... His expression darkened with sudden understanding. Someone messed with the restoration work. Victoria remembered Jake's urgent warning before Preston's public proposal. The northeastern support was failing, someone had tampered with it. The realization struck with horrifying clarity. Richard Morrison was willing to sabotage the mansion's structure, potentially endangering hundreds of guests, to prove the building was unsafe and justify its demolition. Returning to the gala, Victoria found Preston and her mother calming concerned guests while Richard Morrison spoke authoritatively about the inherent dangers of these old structures. The foundation board was already discussing moving future events to more suitable venues. As Victoria watched her carefully restored sanctuary being dismissed as dangerously obsolete, something hardened inside her. The engagement ring felt like a shackle on her finger, the congratulatory smiles like grimaces. She'd spent her career fighting to build something meaningful, only to watch it being packaged for consumption by men who valued profit over people. "Victoria!" Preston called, gesturing her over with the entitlement of ownership. "The governor wants to congratulate us personally." Victoria moved through the crowd mechanically, accepting congratulations with practiced grace while her mind raced through possibilities and contingencies. The board vote was Monday morning. Jake was in his father's custody. The library, the heart of Westbrook Estate, had been sabotaged to fail. And she stood alone, wearing another man's ring, watching her life's work being dismantled piece by piece. The darkest hour had arrived. And for the first time in her carefully controlled life, Victoria Sterling had no strategic response prepared. Dawn found Victoria still awake, pacing her penthouse in the same gala gown, Preston's ring discarded on the coffee table. Maya dozed on the sofa, having spent hours helping Victoria search through the evidence on Jake's flash drive. The documents painted a damning picture of Richard Morrison's business practices, but without Jake's testimony to authenticate them, they might not convince the board to reject the acquisition. Victoria's phone chimed with a text from her mother, requesting her presence at the traditional post-gala brunch. The thought of facing Elizabeth's triumphant planning for a wedding Victoria had no intention of participating in made her physically ill. "You look like hell," Maya observed, yawning as she straightened. "When's the last time you slept?" "Sleep is for people whose companies aren't being stolen and whose." Victoria hesitated, unsure how to classify Jake. "Whose boyfriends aren't being held hostage by corrupt construction magnates." Maya supplied helpfully. Victoria almost smiled despite everything. "Is that what he is?" "My boyfriend. Whatever he is, you've been different since he came into your life." Maya studied her boss with unusual directness. "I've worked with you for 8 years, Victoria. I've watched you build an empire from nothing. But I've never seen you *alive* until that carpenter showed up. What's the point of having everything if you're miserable?" The simple question cut through Victoria's exhaustion like a blade through fog. She'd built Prism Technologies to create something meaningful, to prove herself to a world that underestimated her. Somewhere along the way, the company had become a fortress that protected her from vulnerability while simultaneously isolating her from genuine connection. "I built my company to have freedom," Victoria realized aloud. "But I've become trapped by it instead." "So what are you going to do about it?" Maya challenged. Before Victoria could answer, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She answered cautiously. "Miss Sterling." Danny's voice came through, tense and hurried. "I'm at Mr. M.'s workshop. Someone broke in last night, trashed the place. All his custom tools are gone, and there's a notice saying the building lease has been terminated." "Richard Morrison works quickly," Victoria muttered grimly. "Are you safe, Danny?" "Yeah, but I'm worried about Mr. M. He was supposed to meet me this morning to work on a project, but he never showed. His phone goes straight to voicemail." "I'll find him," Victoria promised. "Stay somewhere safe today." As she ended the call, another realization struck her. The storage unit, harbor facility. That's what the key is for. Within the hour, Victoria and Maya were examining the contents of storage unit 247. Inside they found meticulously organized documentation spanning 5 years, safety reports Jake had salvaged, photographs of construction shortcuts on Morrison projects, testimony from workers who'd been silenced with settlements, and detailed architectural analyses showing how Morrison buildings had been designed to appear code-compliant while cutting critical corners. "This is everything we need," Victoria whispered, leafing through the evidence. "Jake has been building this case for years. But will it be enough to convince your board before tomorrow's vote?" Maya asked. Victoria's phone chimed with a series of alerts, stock market notifications. Prism Technologies' share price was dropping rapidly on rumors of instability following her surprise engagement. The business press was speculating that her personal connection to Preston Whitfield had motivated the Morrison acquisition rather than shareholder value. "They're tanking my stock to pressure the board," Victoria realized. "By tomorrow morning, the acquisition will look like the only way to save the company." Maya watched her boss carefully. What would Jake do in this situation? The question caught Victoria off guard. What would Jake do? He'd walked away from wealth and privilege to build something honest with his hands. He'd chosen integrity over inheritance, authenticity over appearance. Victoria's gaze fell on a framed photograph in the storage unit, Jake and Danny standing proudly beside a restored antique desk, both covered in sawdust but beaming with accomplishment. The caption read simply, "What we build, builds us." Jake taught Danny to fight for what matters, Victoria said slowly, newfound resolve strengthening her voice. "And that's exactly what I'm going to do." As they drove back toward the city, Victoria began issuing rapid-fire instructions to Maya, who typed furiously on her tablet. They needed to locate Jake, secure the board votes, and save Westbrook Estate, all before tomorrow morning's deadline. "Call our security team. I want surveillance on the Morrison Construction headquarters. Jake is likely being held there until after the board vote." Victoria's mind raced through contingencies. Then contact every board member individually. Emergency meetings, one-on-one. Start with Diane Roberts, she's always been the most independent voice. Maya looked up from her tablet. "And if we can't find Jake before tomorrow?" Victoria's expression hardened with determination. "Then I'll face them alone. But I'm not giving up my company or Westbrook Estate without a fight." As night fell over Boston, a black town car pulled up outside Jake's modest apartment building. Victoria stepped out, still wearing yesterday's wrinkled gala dress, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. She'd spent the day in back-to-back emergency meetings with board members, showing them the evidence from Jake's storage unit, fighting for every vote. The lights in Jake's apartment were dark, confirming what Victoria already suspected, he hadn't returned home. She climbed the stairs anyway, needing to feel some connection to him as she prepared for tomorrow's confrontation. To her surprise, a figure sat huddled outside Jake's door, Danny, arms wrapped around his knees, expression desolate. "He taught me to fight for what matters," the teenager said without preamble. "So why is he running?" Victoria sank down beside him. "What do you mean?" Danny pulled out his phone, showing Victoria a text message from Jake, taking some time away. "Sorry to let you down. Find another mentor." "He wouldn't just leave," Danny insisted. "Not without telling me face to face. And he definitely wouldn't bail on our hospital project. We're supposed to deliver that desk next week." Victoria studied the message, recognizing Richard Morrison's manipulative handiwork. "You're right. He wouldn't leave like this." She placed a hand on Danny's shoulder. "Jake believed in you when no one else did. Now it's our turn to believe in him. So what do we do?" Victoria stood, newfound clarity energizing her despite her exhaustion. "We fight. On all fronts." Returning to her penthouse, Victoria found Maya coordinating with Prism's legal team. The assistant looked up, concern evident in her expression. The board still split. 3 solid votes against the acquisition, 3 firmly for it, with Davis as the swing vote. Maya handed Victoria a tablet. "And there's this, Richard Morrison has called a press conference for 7 a.m. before your board meeting. Rumor is he's announcing the acquisition as a done deal." Victoria scrolled through the latest developments, her resolve hardening with each new obstacle. "Have our legal team at the board meeting. And I need structural engineers at Westbrook Estate first thing in the morning. If Morrison sabotaged that beam, I want evidence." "What about Jake?" Victoria stared out at the Boston skyline, the Morrison Construction headquarters visible in the distance, windows still lit despite the late hour. "I have a plan. But I need to do something first." She retreated to her bedroom and opened the wooden box Jake had carved, the miniature replica of Westbrook's library. Her fingers traced the tiny details, the window seat where she'd spent hours reading while Jake worked, the writing desk they'd restored together, even the damaged beam that had trapped them during the storm. Every element captured with a craftsman's precision and an artist's love. Victoria reached for her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. After 3 rings, her mother answered with characteristic impatience. "Victoria, really? It's nearly midnight. I need to know why, Mother. Why have you spent my entire life pushing me toward men like Preston while undermining everything I've built?" The unexpected question was met with silence, then a heavy sigh. "Is this really a conversation you want to have over the phone at this hour?" "Yes. Because tomorrow I'm fighting for my company and for a man who represents everything you've taught me to avoid. Before I do that, I need to understand." Another long pause. When Elizabeth spoke again, her voice had lost its usual imperious tone. "Your father left me with nothing but social connections and debt. The sterling name opened doors, but it didn't pay bills. Every opportunity you've had came from my careful management of appearances and relationships. You're afraid I'll end up alone," Victoria realized. "Like you. I'm afraid you'll end up vulnerable," Elizabeth corrected. "Money and power can disappear overnight, Victoria. I've seen it happen. Family alliances and social position endure." For the first time, Victoria heard the fear beneath her mother's controlling behavior, not malice but misguided protection from a woman who'd known financial insecurity and would do anything to shield her daughter from the same fate. "I'm not you, Mother. And my world isn't yours. The security I need doesn't come from a strategic marriage. You think this carpenter brings you security?" Elizabeth's voice sharpened with disbelief. "No. He brings me truth." Victoria's voice softened. "Isn't that what you really wanted for me? Someone who sees me for who I am, not what I represent." The silence stretched between them, decades of misunderstanding and missed connections hanging in the balance. Finally, Elizabeth sighed. "Your father would be proud of you, Victoria. He always said you had his courage and my backbone, a terrifying combination." A pause, then more quietly, "Do what you need to do." After ending the call, Victoria turned to find Maya standing in the doorway, expression uncharacteristically emotional. "Car's ready," her assistant reported. "The team's in place." Victoria nodded, determination replacing exhaustion. "Then let's go get him." The town car slipped through Boston's empty streets toward Morrison Construction's headquarters. Victoria had changed from her gala dress into a power suit, armor for the battle ahead. The security team had confirmed Jake was inside the building, apparently working through the night on emergency project revisions. Victoria's phone lit up with a text from an unknown number, northeastern corner. "Service entrance. Security disabled for 3 minutes at 2 a.m. "Who's that from?" Maya asked, peering at the message. Victoria smiled for the first time in 24 hours. "I believe we have an ally inside Morrison Construction. Not everyone agrees with Richard's methods." As the car approached the towering glass building, Victoria turned to Maya. "I need you to coordinate the board members for emergency breakfast meetings. Keep them away from Morrison's press conference." Maya nodded. "And you?" Victoria's gaze turned to the illuminated office at the top floor, Richard Morrison's domain, where Jake was likely being held. "I'm going to give Jake the same choice he gave me. A chance to fight for what matters." At precisely 2 a.m., Victoria slipped through the service entrance, guided by building schematics Maya had somehow obtained. The security cameras in this corridor had mysteriously gone offline, giving her a narrow window to reach the executive elevators. Her access card, courtesy of their anonymous ally, granted her entry to the top floor. As the elevator doors opened, Victoria steeled herself for whatever confrontation awaited. She'd spent her career in boardroom battles, but this was different. This time, it wasn't just her company at stake, it was her heart. The executive suite was dimly lit, but voices carried from Richard Morrison's office, tense, argumentative. Victoria moved silently toward the partially open door. "You're making a mistake, Jacob." Richard Morrison's voice was controlled but menacing. "Everything I've built, I built for you. You built it on corruption and corner cutting." Jake's reply was weary but unbroken. "I won't be part of that legacy, Dad." "Then you leave me no choice. By morning, Sterling's board will approve our acquisition. Her company will be dismantled, her precious mansion demolished, and your little carpentry business will mysteriously lose its permits and contracts. Do what you have to do." Jake's voice hardened. "But understand this, I've already transferred my Morrison Construction shares to a trust for Danny's apprenticeship program. You can't touch them." Richard's laugh was coldly appreciative. "You always were the strategic one. But you've overlooked something important. Victoria Sterling doesn't know you the way I do. Once she learns the full truth about our family, about the Morrison methods, she'll realize you're cut from the same cloth." Victoria had heard enough. She pushed the door open, stepping into the harsh overhead lights of Richard Morrison's minimalist office. "Actually," she said calmly, "I believe I'm qualified to judge that for myself." Both men turned in shock. Jake half rose from his chair, hope and disbelief warring on his exhausted face. "Victoria?" Richard recovered quickly, professional smile sliding into place. "Miss Sterling. This is highly irregular." "So is corporate sabotage and hostage-taking," Victoria countered smoothly, moving to stand beside Jake's chair, a deliberate choice of sides. "I've seen the evidence, Mr. Morrison. All of it. The falsified safety reports, the threatened workers, the structural sabotage at my mansion." Richard's expression hardened. "Accusations without proof make for expensive libel suits, Miss Sterling. I have proof." Victoria placed her hand on Jake's shoulder, drawing strength from the solid warmth beneath her fingers. "Your son has spent 5 years documenting every shortcut, every cover-up, every illegal practice. By morning, the SEC, OSHA, and the district attorney will have complete files." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Richard Morrison's face. He glanced at his son with newfound wariness. Jacob wouldn't risk the livelihoods of thousands of employees. He's made that clear before. "He wouldn't," Victoria agreed. "But I would. Because unlike Jake, I don't share your DNA or your complicated history. I'm just a CEO protecting my company from a hostile and unethical takeover." Jake stood slowly, his hand finding Victoria's in a gesture that communicated more than words could. United, they faced Richard Morrison across his empire of glass and steel. "It's over, Dad," Jake said quietly. "The acquisition, the threats, all of it. Victoria's board has seen the evidence. They're voting against the merger." "You can't possibly have secured the votes," Richard sneered, though his confidence appeared shaken. Victoria smiled. "You underestimate how persuasive your son can be. His evidence was quite compelling to board members who value their freedom from federal prosecution." Richard Morrison studied them both, calculation replacing anger. Always the strategist, he was already seeking an alternative route to victory. "I'll destroy Westbrook Estate," he threatened. "I already own the land beneath it through a shell company. I can legally collapse the foundation." Victoria felt Jake tense beside her, but his voice remained steady. "Actually, you can't. I filed the mansion for landmark status at 7 a.m. yesterday. Emergency provision due to historical significance. It's protected now." Richard Morrison stared at his son, something like respect finally entering his gaze. "You've thought of everything." "I learned from the best," Jake replied without irony. "The difference is how I've chosen to use those lessons." Victoria squeezed Jake's hand, then addressed Richard directly. "The press conference tomorrow is cancelled. The acquisition is off. And if you come after Jake, Danny, or Westbrook Estate again, the evidence goes public." As they turned to leave, Richard called after them. "Jacob! After all this, you'd choose her over your family legacy." Jake paused in the doorway, his arm around Victoria's waist. "No. I'm choosing MY legacy. And it starts with integrity, not inheritance. And it starts with integrity, not inheritance. In the elevator descending to the lobby, Jake finally pulled Victoria into his arms, holding her as though she might disappear if he let go. I thought I'd lost you, he murmured against her hair. Victoria leaned back to study his face, the face of a man who'd walked away from fortune for principle, who'd built beauty with his hands when he could have controlled an empire with his name. I choose you, she said simply. I choose us. And I'm going to fight. Jake's expression turned serious. I have a plan. But it requires you to trust me with everything, your company, your mansion, your heart. Victoria felt the last of her carefully constructed walls dissolve, replaced by something infinitely stronger: choice, trust, partnership freely given rather than strategically calculated. I already do, she whispered, and sealed the promise with a kiss. Monday morning arrived with the clarity that follows storms. Victoria entered Prism Technologies' headquarters an hour before the scheduled board meeting, Maya at her side carrying multiple tablets loaded with evidence. Jake waited outside in a car, ready to provide testimony if needed but staying strategically out of sight until the crucial moment. Preston and Richard have been calling board members all night, Maya reported, scrolling through messages. Davis is wavering again. Victoria nodded calmly. Let them waste their energy. We have what they don't. Which is? The truth. Victoria checked her appearance in the elevator's mirrored walls, power suit impeccably tailored, posture straight, eyes clear despite minimal sleep. She looked exactly like the CEO who had built Prism from nothing. But she felt fundamentally changed, as though the foundation of who she was had been reinforced overnight. The boardroom was already filling when Victoria entered. Chairman Davis looked uncomfortable, avoiding her gaze. 3 board members nodded in greeting, the votes Victoria had secured yesterday. The remaining 3 clustered around Preston, who looked smugly confident in an expensive suit, already positioned at the head of the table where Victoria normally sat today. The door opened again, and Richard Morrison entered, flanked by attorneys. If he was surprised to see Victoria already present, he masked it well. Miss Sterling, he acknowledged with cold professionalism. I believe we have a productive meeting ahead. Indeed we do, Mr. Morrison. Victoria remained standing as everyone else took seats. Before we begin, I've prepared a brief presentation addressing the proposed acquisition. Preston leaned forward with a patronizing smile. Victoria, darling, the votes are already secured. This is merely a formality before signing the agreements. Victoria's answering smile was diamond sharp. Then you won't mind a brief overview for the record. Without waiting for permission, she nodded to Maya, who activated the room's projection system. The screen filled with architectural blueprints, Jake's detailed analysis of 5 Morrison construction projects where safety standards had been compromised. Victoria moved through the presentation with methodical precision, highlighting falsified inspection reports alongside photographs of substandard materials. These documents demonstrate a clear pattern of regulatory violation spanning 7 years, Victoria continued, her voice steady as Richard Morrison's face darkened with barely contained fury. Morrison Construction has systematically endangered lives for profit margins. This is corporate espionage, Richard interrupted, signaling his attorneys. These documents, if they even exist, were clearly obtained illegally. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway, they were obtained by a Morrison Construction executive with full access privileges. All heads turned as Jake entered the boardroom, dressed not in carpenter's clothes but in a suit that marked him unmistakably as what he was, a Jacob Morrison, heir to the company his father had built. Preston's smug expression faltered. What is he doing here? Jacob is here as both witness and whistleblower, Victoria explained calmly. As vice president of special projects at Morrison Construction, he has first-hand knowledge of the practices documented in this presentation. Richard Morrison rose slowly, addressing the board with practiced authority. My son has been estranged from the company for personal reasons. Whatever documentation he's provided is outdated and taken out of context. Is that so? Victoria nodded to Maya, who advanced to the next slide, dated security footage showing Richard himself instructing foremen to substitute inferior materials on a project bearing the governor's name. This footage is from 3 months ago. The material specified failed to meet code requirements by 40%. The room fell silent as board members absorbed the implications. Chairman Davis looked physically ill. If this acquisition proceeds, Victoria continued, Morrison Construction plans to integrate Prism's structural monitoring technology with their construction practices. The result would be buildings that appear safe on monitoring systems while cutting critical safety corners. Jake moved to stand beside Victoria, their shoulders almost touching. I can authenticate all documentation presented and testify to the accuracy of Ms. Sterling's statements. Richard Morrison's composure finally cracked. You would betray your own family? Everything I built? I'm protecting people from what you built, Jake replied steadily. There's a difference. Preston, sensing the room's shifting sentiment, attempted damage control. These are serious allegations that deserve investigation. However, they don't negate the financial benefits of the acquisition. The shareholder value would be irreparably damaged by association with these practices, Victoria interrupted. Not to mention the potential liability Prism would assume for past violations. Chairman Davis cleared his throat. I believe we should delay the vote until these allegations can be properly vetted. No need to delay, Victoria countered. I call for an immediate vote on the Morrison acquisition offer. The next 15 minutes unfolded with brutal efficiency. One by one, board members registered their votes. When the final tally appeared on the screen, 7 against, 0 for, Preston's face contorted with barely contained rage. This is a mistake, he hissed at Victoria. You're throwing away a billion-dollar opportunity. I'm preserving something worth more. Victoria held his gaze without flinching. My company's integrity and my own self-respect. As the board members filed out, subdued conversations filling the corridor, Richard Morrison remained seated, studying his son with newfound wariness. You planned this from the beginning, he said finally. Taking that renovation job, getting close to her, all of it. Jake shook his head. I planned to warn her about your acquisition. Everything else? He glanced at Victoria, something warm passing between them. Everything else was unexpected. Richard's laugh held no humor. You think you've won? The board rejected the acquisition, fine. But I still own the land underneath Westbrook Estate through Meridian Holdings. The mansion you've worked so hard to save sits on property I legally control. Victoria felt Jake tense beside her, but his voice remained calm. I thought you might have made that move. That's why I filed for historical landmark designation as soon as I confirmed the shell company ownership. For the first time, genuine surprise registered on Richard Morrison's face. The application was approved on expedited review at 7 a.m. this morning, Jake continued. Westbrook Estate is now protected under the Historical Preservation Act. You can't touch the foundation, the structure, or even the landscaping without commission approval. Richard's expression hardened as he turned to Victoria. You've made a powerful enemy today, Ms. Sterling. No, Victoria corrected him. I've simply declined to make a disastrous alliance. There's a difference. As Richard gathered his documents, Preston made one last attempt. Victoria, be reasonable. We've known each other for years. Our families have history. Are you really choosing this, Carpenter, over someone of your own background? The door opened before Victoria could respond. Elizabeth Sterling stood in the threshold, impeccably dressed as always, but something in her expression had softened. Mother, Victoria acknowledged with surprise. I didn't expect you. Elizabeth surveyed the room with practiced social assessment. I thought you might need support today. Her gaze lingered on Preston's angry face, Richard's cold fury, and finally settled on Jake standing protectively at Victoria's side. Mr. Whitfield, Elizabeth addressed Preston with unexpected coolness. I believe my daughter has made her choice quite clear. The ring, if you please. Preston blinked in confusion. Elizabeth, surely you understand what's at stake here. The merger would secure Victoria's position. My daughter secured her own position when she built a billion-dollar company from her dorm room, Elizabeth interrupted with unexpected fierceness. "The ring, Preston." "Now." When Preston hesitated, Elizabeth extended her hand with the imperious expectation of someone accustomed to being obeyed. To Victoria's astonishment, Preston removed the ostentatious diamond from his pocket and reluctantly placed it in Elizabeth's palm. "You'll regret this," he muttered to Victoria before stalking from the room. Elizabeth approached her daughter, the massive diamond glinting in her hand. This belonged to his grandmother, she noted critically. "Garish setting. Never suited you." With casual disregard, she dropped it into her purse. "I'll have it returned to the family vault." Victoria stared at her mother in bewilderment. "You're not angry?" "Furious," Elizabeth confirmed calmly. "But not with you." She turned to Jake, studying him with new consideration. "Young man, I believe I owe you an apology for my behavior at the mansion. Your restoration work is quite impressive." Jake accepted the olive branch with grace. "Thank you, Mrs. Sterling." Elizabeth's attention returned to Victoria. "Your father walked away from his family shipping business to start over with nothing but his engineering degree. Everyone said he was throwing his life away." A wistful smile softened her features. "He said some foundations need to be completely rebuilt to support what truly matters." Victoria felt something shift between them, decades of misunderstanding giving way to a fragile new understanding. Before she could respond, Richard Morrison rose for a final confrontation. "Jacob," he addressed his son directly. "This is your last chance. After all this, would you choose her over your family legacy?" The room fell silent, the question hanging in the air between father and son. Jake met his father's gaze unflinchingly, his arm slipping around Victoria's waist in a gesture that was both protective and declarative. "No," Jake answered clearly. "I'm choosing my legacy. And it starts with integrity, not inheritance." Richard's face hardened with finality. "Then you are no longer my son." "I'll always be your son," Jake replied quietly. "But I won't be your accomplice." After Richard departed, Victoria turned to Jake, the reality of what he'd sacrificed for her, his family, his inheritance, his identity, suddenly overwhelming. "Jake, He silenced her with a gentle finger against her lips. "Don't you dare thank me. I made my choice 5 years ago when I first walked away. Today I just finished what I started." Elizabeth cleared her throat delicately. "Perhaps we should discuss the library renovation. The damaged beam from the gala requires attention, and frankly, I've developed a certain attachment to the space." Victoria blinked at this unexpected shift. The beam was deliberately sabotaged. "Of course it was," Elizabeth agreed briskly. "Richard Morrison's methods are disappointingly predictable. However, I believe there are ways to incorporate the damage into the restoration. A symbol of resilience, perhaps." She glanced meaningfully between Victoria and Jake. "Some things become stronger after being broken." As they left the boardroom together, CEO, Carpenter, and society matriarch united by unexpected circumstances, Victoria felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The damage beam that had first brought her and Jake together during the storm would become a symbolic cornerstone. Together they would rebuild what had been broken, literally and metaphorically constructing a future neither had imagined possible. The battle had been won. But more importantly, something new had begun to take shape from the wreckage, something authentic, unexpected, and built to last. 6 months later, autumn sunlight streamed through the restored leaded glass windows of Westbrook Estates Library. Where construction dust and power tools had once dominated, now gleaming woodwork and carefully preserved architectural details created a space that honored both history and future possibility. Victoria stood in the center of the room, watching as a group of high school students received instruction from Danny, now confidently explaining the basics of wood joinery to attentive faces. The library had been transformed into the headquarters for the Sterling Morrison Foundation for Creative Trades, Victoria's new passion project that provided underprivileged youth with education in both business skills and traditional craftsmanship. "Dan is a natural teacher," Maya observed, joining Victoria with a tablet displaying the foundation's latest metrics. 3 of his students have already been offered apprenticeships. Victoria smiled, watching the teenager who had once faced a probation officer now guiding others with steady hands and earned wisdom. Jake said talent doesn't care about zip codes or records. He was right. The foundation represented a new balance Victoria had discovered in her life. She still served as Prism's CEO, but had restructured the company to focus on ethical applications of their technology while delegating day-to-day operations to a trusted executive team. 3 days each week were now dedicated to the foundation, working alongside Jake to create opportunities that combine technical innovation with traditional craftsmanship. The governor's office called again, Maya reported. They're interested in expanding the program statewide. Tell them we'll need to discuss increased funding for the training facilities. Victoria checked her watch. Any word from the commission? Maya grinned. Approved unanimously this morning. Westbrook Estate is officially recognized as a landmark of both historical and cultural significance. The front door opened, admitting a blast of autumn air and Elizabeth Sterling, elegant as always in a tailored suit that somehow still managed to appear appropriate for volunteer work. In one of the most surprising developments of the past 6 months, Victoria's mother had become deeply involved in the foundation, discovering a genuine talent for fundraising and a previously hidden passion for mentoring young women interested in business. Victoria, darling, Elizabeth called, making her way through the students with graceful authority. The Historical Preservation Committee has agreed to feature Westbrook in their annual publication. They're particularly interested in the library restoration techniques. That's Jake's department, Victoria replied. He's in the workshop finishing the conference table. Elizabeth nodded approvingly. I'll speak with him directly, then. Oh, she paused, extracting an envelope from her designer handbag. This arrived for you. From Europe. Victoria recognized Preston's handwriting immediately. After the failed acquisition and broken engagement, he had abruptly relocated to the family's estate in Switzerland. The note inside was brief but surprisingly sincere. Victoria, traveling has given me perspective. What I wanted was the idea of you, not the remarkable woman you actually are. I'm sorry. Building something meaningful takes more courage than acquiring what others have built. Wishing you happiness. Preston. Unexpected, Victoria murmured, folding the note. Elizabeth raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. Growth can come from the most unlikely sources. She glanced meaningfully at her daughter. Some of us learned that lesson earlier than others. As the afternoon workshop concluded, Victoria made her way through the mansion's restored corridors toward the carriage house that had become Jake's professional studio. The business he'd built as a carpenter had evolved into an ethical architecture and restoration firm that now employed several former Morrison construction workers who'd left after Richard's practices were exposed. Victoria paused in the doorway, taking a moment to simply watch Jake work. He stood at a massive drafting table, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms as he made precise adjustments to architectural plans. The past 6 months had transformed him as well, no longer hiding from his heritage but reclaiming the best parts of it, combining his architect's vision with a craftsman's hands-on approach. He looked up, somehow sensing her presence, and the smile that spread across his face still made her heart race. Hey, you. Hey yourself. Victoria crossed to examine his work, plans for their next project, a community workshop in a disadvantaged neighborhood. The Historical Commission approved the landmark status. Jake's smile widened. Never had a doubt. He pulled her into his arms, the embrace as natural as breathing after months of building a life together. How's the new program going? Danny's becoming a better teacher than both of us, Victoria replied, leaning into his solid warmth. And my mother has somehow appointed herself chief fundraiser and etiquette instructor. The students are simultaneously terrified and adoring. Jake laughed, the sound still a revelation to Victoria after years of guarded corporate interactions. Elizabeth Sterling, champion of second chances. Who would have thought? Speaking of second chances, Victoria traced the simple wooden band on her left ring finger. Jake had carved it himself from wood salvage during the library restoration. Their engagement, announced without fanfare 3 months earlier, had generated business headlines but felt like the most natural step imaginable to them both. "Have you heard from your father?" Jake's expression sobered slightly. His lawyers reached out about settling the whistleblower lawsuit. "No personal contact." He shrugged, old pain evident but no longer dominant. "Some foundations can't be repaired. But new ones can be built," Victoria reminded him softly. "Speaking of building," Jake said, retrieving a rolled set of plans from a nearby shelf. "I wanted to show you these. For when you're ready." Victoria unrolled the architectural drawings, immediately recognizing the property boundaries of a wooded lot they'd visited near the coast. But instead of the modern steel and glass structure she'd expected, Jake had designed something entirely different, a home that harmoniously blended traditional craftsmanship with sustainable innovation, timber framing alongside solar technology. "It's beautiful," she whispered, fingers tracing the detailed drawings that somehow captured both their sensibilities. "When did you do this?" "Been working on it at night." Jake's arms encircled her from behind as they studied the plans together. "Thought we might build it ourselves." "Well, with some help." Victoria leaned back against him, the simple rightness of their partnership still sometimes overwhelming. "Think we can handle building a house **a marriage?" Jake's chuckle rumbled against her back as he pulled her closer. "We already survived a collapsing mansion, corporate espionage, and your mother. Building something beautiful together? That's the easy part." He turned her in his arms, his kiss conveying everything words couldn't: promise, passion, partnership freely chosen rather than inherited or acquired. Later that evening, Victoria stood in the completed library, the heart of the mansion that had brought them together. The setting sun cast amber light across restored woodwork and gleaming floors. In the central archway, the once damaged beam remained visible, but Jake had reinforced it with steel and inlaid the cracked sections with gold, transforming structural weakness into deliberate beauty. Jake joined her, slipping his hand into hers as they admired their shared creation. The library shelves now held both antique volumes and modern textbooks for the foundation students. The writing desk where Victoria had first attempted sanding now served as a teaching station, and the window seat where she'd sought refuge during construction had become her favorite spot for reading grant proposals. "You know," Jake said thoughtfully, "when I took this renovation job, I was just trying to warn you about my father's plans." Victoria smiled. "And I was just trying to escape my mother's matchmaking. Funny how life works out." Jake brushed a strand of hair from her face with tender familiarity. "The structure you think is crumbling is actually making room for something stronger," Victoria finished, the wisdom of the past month settling into certainty. "I spent years building walls to protect what I thought mattered. And I spent years walking away from what I thought would define me," Jake added. "Turns out we were both just clearing the foundation." As evening deepened into night, they remained in the library that had witnessed their beginning, surrounded by the craftsmanship of the past and the possibilities of the future they were building together, beam by carefully restored beam. "So my loves, what did you think? Have you ever met someone who changed your whole world? Let me know in the comments. And remember, subscribe for more stories about love that breaks all the rules. Until next time, keep believing in happy endings that are also new beginnings. See you soon.